Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, welcome to Playing with Power MTG, where we play with the most powerful cards in the most powerful formats. Tonight's game is brought to you by TCGplayer.com, where you can find all of your cards online while still supporting local game stores. Dragon Shield for all of the best accessories to protect your decks, and through Patreon, where you get awesome benefits for your direct support. For tonight's game, we are playing with our patron Tyler. He signed up to our Mox Pearl tier and as a result gets to play with us for this episode. This episode was made possible by all of our supporters over on Patreon. Our Patreon offers tons of benefits, including Discord access and live streaming, behind the scenes footage, raw gameplay, additional gameplay series, merchandise discounts, and archive footage of old games as well. We have tiers at all budgets, so sign up today. Now, let's start out by showcasing our fighters this evening. First, we have Zach piloting the first Sliver. This is a turbo food chain deck. It pairs Food Chain with a cast from exile creature to generate infinite creature mana and then use your commander to win the game. His opening hand contains a Bloodstained Mire, Polluted Delta, Kraum Mox, Noble Hierarch, Vinehorn Elves, Spell Pierce, and a Limdul's Vault. Next, we have Adam piloting Yuriko the Tiger Shadow. This is a mid-range deck that looks to connect with ninjas, control the board, and drain out its opponents through Yuriko's ability. His opening hand contains a Cavern of Souls, Urborg Tomb of Yawgmoth, Ornithopter, Vampiric Tutor, Mistblade Shinobi, Misdirection, and a snow-covered island. After that, we have Mike piloting the partner pair of Tevesh Zot, Doom of Fools, and Kraum, Ludovic's Opus. This is a turbo ad nauseam deck with some serious value in the command zone. His opening hand contains a Tainted Pact, Volcanic Island, Gamble, Felwar Stone, Vampiric Tutor, Swan Song, and a Cabal Ritual. Finally, we have Tyler piloting his homebrew of CEDH Nekusar, the Mind Razor. This is a proactive deck that looks to win with either Turbo Ad Nauseam, Wheels, or an Underworld Breach combo. His opening hand contains a Gilded Drake, Demonic Consultation, Mystic Remora, Wooded Foothills, Chrome Mox, Wheel of Fortune, and his London Mulligan is a Deflecting Swat. Without further ado, let's begin this macroscopic, malefic, Machiavellian, meritorious monster mash. Zach wins the Best Editor award and gets to start us off. Zach draws a card for turn and plays a Polluted Delta. He cranks it, pays 1 life, and fetches up a tropical island onto the battlefield. He casts a Noble Hierarch. He casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Extract. He ends his turn. Adam draws a card for turn and plays an Urborg, Tomb of Yawgmoth. He casts an Ornithopter. Adam passes. Mike draws a card for turn and plays a Volcanic Island. He casts Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards a Felwar Stone. He casts a Mana Crypt. He passes the turn. Tyler draws a card for turn and plays a Wooded Foothills. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up a Volcanic Island onto the battlefield. He casts a Mystic Remora. In response, Adam casts Vampiric Tutor. He fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Mystic Remora resolves, and then Tyler follows it up by casting a Chrome Mox, imprinting Pact of Negation. He ends his turn. Zach draws and casts a Vinehorn Elves. He plays a Forbidden Orchard. Zach passes. Adam draws and plays a Snow-Covered Island. He moves to combat and attacks Mike with Ornithopter. Mike doesn't block, and Adam activates Yuriko's ninjutsu ability, returning Ornithopter to his hand and putting Yuriko onto the battlefield tapped and attacking Mike. Mike takes a hit, and Yuriko triggers. Adam reveals Dismember through Yuriko's ability, and his opponents lose 3 life. In his second main phase, Adam recasts Ornithopter. He ships the turn to Mike. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt flip and takes 3 damage. He draws and casts Talisman of Dominance. Remora triggers, and Tyler draws. Mike passes to Tyler. During his upkeep, Tyler pays for a Remora. He draws and casts a Burning Inquiry. Each player draws 3 cards and then discards 3 cards at random. Tyler casts a Lion's Eye Diamond and passes the turn. Zach draws and casts a Carpet of Flowers. Remora triggers and Tyler draws. Zach moves to a second main phase and adds 1 black through his carpet. He taps Forbidden Orchard and gives Tyler a Spirit. He casts his commander, the first Sliver. Cascade triggers and Zach reveals a Rhystic Study and casts it. Remora triggers again and Tyler draws. With Rhystic still in the stack, Mike taps Volcanic Island for a black through Urborg and casts a Vampiric Tutor. Remora triggers and Tyler draws. Mike fetches up a card onto the top of his library and loses 2 life. Rhystic Study and the first Sliver resolve, and Zach ships the turn to Adam. Adam draws and moves to combat. He attacks Zach with Ornithopter and Mike with Yuriko. Zach and Mike don't block, and before damage, Adam returns Ornithopter to his hand and ninjutsus in a Mistblade Shinobi. Zach and Mike take the hit, Mistblade triggers, and Yuriko triggers twice. Mistblade Shinobi bounces the first Sliver to Zach's hand, and then Adam reveals a Misty Rainforest through Yuriko, and a Demonic Consultation through Yuriko, and his opponents lose 1 life. In his second main phase, Adam recasts Ornithopter, paying for Rhystic Study. He plays an Underground River and ends the turn. During his upkeep, Mike loses his Mana Crypt flip and takes 3 damage. He draws and casts a Dockside Extortionist, paying the Rhystic tax. It enters, and then Mike creates 7 treasures. He plays a Gemstone Caverns, which enters with a 1/5 of a luck counter through Urboard. He cracks a treasure to cast Diabolic Intent, sacrificing Dockside as an additional cost and paying for Rhystic Study. Remora triggers and Tyler draws. Mike fetches up a card into his hand. He casts Reanimate, targeting Dockside Extortionist, paying the Rhystic tax. Remora triggers and Tyler draws. Mike returns Dockside to the battlefield and loses 2 life. Dockside triggers and Mike creates 7 more treasures. He cracks treasures to cast his commander, Kraum, Ludovic's Opus, paying for Rhystic. Mike moves to combat and attacks Adam with Kraum. Adam takes the hit and Mike ends his turn. During his upkeep, Tyler lets his Remora die. He draws and plays a City of Brass. He casts a Mana Crypt, paying for Rhystic. He casts a Soul Ring, paying Rhystic again. Kraum triggers and Mike draws. He casts an Izzet Signet. Rhystic triggers and Zach draws. Tyler casts a Winds of Change. Rhystic triggers again and Zach draws. Winds of Change resolves and each player shuffles their hand into their library and draws cards equal to their hand size. Tyler casts a Dockside Extortionist. Rhystic triggers and Zach draws. Much to the dismay of the table, Mike decides not to sacrifice his treasures. Dockside enters and Tyler creates 11 treasures. He casts an overloaded Cyclonic Rift, paying for Rhystic. Rift resolves and Tyler's opponents bounce all of their non-land permanents to their hands. Tyler casts a Ponder. He looks at the top 3, doesn't like what he sees, shuffles, and draws. He moves to combat and attacks Adam with a Spirit. Adam takes the hit and Tyler passes to Zach. Zach draws and casts a Chrome Mox, imprinting Finehorn Elves. He casts a Carpet of Flowers. He moves to his second main phase and adds a blue mana through his carpet. Zach casts a Phantasmal Image. It enters as a copy of Dockside and Zach creates 7 treasures. He casts a Gamble. He fetches up a card into his hand and then randomly discards Tainted Pact. Zach casts Mystic Remora. He casts a Soul Ring. He recasts Rhystic Study. He taps Forbidden Orchard, giving Mike a Spirit, and casts Birds of Paradise. He casts an Elvish Mystic. He casts a Noble Hierarch. He casts an Elves of Deep Shadow. With his Mana Dork convention in full swing, Zach passes the turn. Adam draws and plays a Swamp. He casts Ornithopter, paying for Rhystic. Deciding not to play into both Rhystic and Mystic, he passes, discarding the hand size. Mike draws and plays a Morphic Pool. He casts Dockside Extortionist, again, paying for Rhystic Study. It enters and Mike creates 13 treasures. He recasts his commander, Kraum, Ludovic's Opus, paying the Study tax. He casts his other commander, Tevesh, Doom of Fools, paying for Rhystic Study. Remora triggers and Zach draws. He activates Tevesh's first ability and creates 2 Thrall tokens. Mike ends his turn. During his upkeep, Tyler loses his Mana Crypt flip and takes 3 damage. He draws and plays a Bloodstained Mire. He cracks it, pays a life, and fetches up an Underground Sea onto the battlefield. He taps City of Brass and casts a Time Spiral. Rhystic and Mystic trigger and Zach draws 2. In response, Adam flashes in an Opposition Agent to get it out of his hand. Rhystic triggers and Zach draws again. Time Spiral resolves, each player shuffles their hand and graveyard into their library and draws 7. Tyler then untaps his 3 lands. He casts a Rhystic Study, paying the Study tax. Kraum triggers and Mike draws. Remora triggers and Zach draws. In response, Adam exiles 2 blue cards from his hand and casts Commandeer, targeting Study. Rhystic and Mystic trigger and Zach draws 2. Tyler responds by tapping City of Brass to cast Mana Drain, targeting Commandeer. Rhystic and Mystic trigger and Zach draws 2. Drain counters Commandeer, Rhystic Study resolves, and then Tyler moves to his second main phase. He creates 7 colorless mana through Mana Drain. He casts a Riel the Everwise, paying for Rhystic Study. He casts Lotus Petal, paying the 5 mana for Rhystic and Mystic. Pleased with himself, Tyler passes the turn to Zach. During his upkeep, Zach pays for his Mystic Remora. He draws and adds 2 blue mana through his Carpet of Flowers. He casts a Brainstorm, paying for Study. He draws 3 and puts 2 back on top. He casts a Mana Vault. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. Kraum triggers and Mike draws. Zach plays a Mana Confluence. He taps Elves of Deep Shadow and Forbidden Orchard, giving Tyler a Spirit, and casts Praetor's Grasp, targeting Mike. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. Zach fetches up a card from Mike's library and then exiles it face down. He casts the exiled card, which is a Dark Ritual. Rhystic triggers and Tyler draws. Zach makes 3 black mana and then casts Necropotence, paying the Study tax. Zach activates Necropotence 10 times, paying 10 life, and exiling the top 10 cards of his library. He moves to his end step and puts the exiled cards into his hand. Zach passes the turn, discarding the hand size, exiling the discarded cards. Adam draws and moves to combat. He attacks Zach with Ornithopter. Zach can't block, and Adam activates Yuriko's ninjutsu ability, returning Ornithopter to his hand and putting Yuriko onto the battlefield, tapped and attacking Zach. Zach takes the hit, and Yuriko triggers. Adam reveals a Flusterstorm, and his opponents lose 1 life. In his second main phase, Adam plays a Clearwater Pathway. He casts Ornithopter, paying for both Ristics. He ends the turn. Mike draws and activates Tevesh's second ability, sacrificing a Thrall and drawing 2 cards. He plays a Training Center. He casts his own Mystic Remora. Both Ristics and Remora trigger, Tyler draws 1 and Zach draws 2. In response, Zach pays 2 life and casts Mental Misstep, paying for Ristic and targeting Mystic Remora. Remora gets countered and Mike decides to just send it. He casts a Ristic Study. Both Ristics and Remora trigger, Tyler draws 1 and Zach draws 2. Study resolves and Mike ships the turn to Tyler, discarding to hand size. During his upkeep, Tyler wins his Mana Crypt flip. He draws and plays a Command Tower. He casts his commander, Nekusar the Mindrazor, paying for Zach's Ristic Study. Mike's Ristic triggers and he draws. Tyler moves to combat and attacks Zach with Dockside, Riel, and a Spirit Token. Zach blocks Riel and takes 2. Tyler passes the turn. At the end of Tyler's turn, Mike casts Red Elemental Blast, targeting Zach's Mystic Remora. Both Ristics and Remora trigger, Tyler draws 1 and Zach draws 2. Nekusar triggers and Zach takes 2 damage. Mystic Remora is destroyed and Tyler discards 2 cards to hand size. Riel triggers and he draws 2 cards. He moves to clean up again, discards the hand size, and then the turn moves to Zach. Zach skips his draw step due to Necropotence. In his main phase, he makes 2 black mana through his carpet. He plays an Underground Sea. He casts an Ad Nauseam, paying for both Ristics. In response, Tyler casts Fierce Guardianship for its alternate cost, paying for Zach's Ristic Study. Mike's Ristic Study triggers and he draws, taking 1 from Nekusar. Zach responds by casting Dispel, targeting Fierce Guardianship and paying for Tyler's Ristic Study. Mike's Kraum and Study trigger and he draws 2 cards, taking 2 damage from Nekusar. Tyler responds by casting Flusterstorm with a storm count of 4, with all copies targeting Ad Nauseam and paying for Zach's Ristic Study. Mike's Kraum and Study trigger and he draws 2 cards, taking 2 damage from Nekusar. Flusterstorm then resolves and Zach taps Elves of Deep Shadow and pays for each Flusterstorm. Dispel counters Fierce Guardianship, and with Ad Nauseam still on the stack, Adam responds by casting another Flusterstorm, targeting Ad Nauseam as well. All 3 of his opponent's Ristic Study triggers and they each draw a card. Zach and Mike both take 1 damage from Nekusar. Zach responds to Flusterstorm with one of the few answers, another Flusterstorm, targeting each copy of Adam's Flusterstorm. Tyler and Mike's Ristics trigger and they both draw. Mike takes the damage from Nekusar. In response, Tyler exiles a blue card from his hand, paying a life, and casts Force of Will, targeting Ad Nauseam. Tyler pays for Mike's Ristic Study, Zach's Ristic triggers, and he draws, taking the damage to Nekusar. Zach responds by casting a Pact of Negation, targeting Force of Will. Tyler and Mike's Ristics trigger, and they both draw. Mike takes the damage from Nekusar. Pact of Negation counters Force of Will, Zach's Flusterstorm counters Adam's Flusterstorm, and Ad Nauseam finally resolves. Zach reveals an Elvish Spirit Guide, Swan Song, Underworld Breach, and decides to stop there, putting the revealed cards into his hand. He exiles Elvish Spirit Guide from his hand and makes a green. He casts Underworld Breach. Tyler and Mike's Ristic trigger and they both draw. Mike takes the damage from Nekusar. Breach resolves and Zach follows it up by casting a Lion's Eye Diamond. Tyler and Mike's Ristic trigger and they both draw, and then Mike takes another damage from Nekusar. LED resolves and Zach cracks it for 3 black, discarding his hand, exiling the cards through Necropotence. He escapes Praetor's Grasp from his graveyard, targeting Mike. Tyler and Mike's Ristic trigger and they both draw. Mike takes the damage from Nekusar, and then Zach fetches up a card from Mike's library and exiles it face down. Zach escapes LED from his graveyard. Tyler and Mike's Ristic trigger and they both draw. Mike takes the damage to Nekusar, and then LED resolves. Zach cracks it for 3 blue mana. He casts Mike's Brain Freeze from exile, tapping Mana Confluence to pay for both Ristics. Brain Freeze resolves and Zach mills. He escapes LED again. Tyler and Mike's Ristics trigger and they both draw. Mike takes the damage from Nekusar. Zach cracks LED for 3 blue and then escapes LED. Tyler and Mike's Ristics trigger again and they both draw again. Mike takes the damage from Nekusar. LED resolves and Zach cracks it for 3 black mana. He escapes LED for a 3rd time, Ristics trigger, they draw, and Mike takes the damage. Zach cracks LED for 3 green and then escapes Veil of Summer. Tyler and Mike's Ristics trigger, they draw, and then Mike takes the damage. Veil of Summer resolves, Zach draws a card and takes the damage from Nekusar. Zach then escapes Thassa's Oracle, paying for both Ristics. It enters, and with the ETB on the stack, he escapes Demonic Consultation from his graveyard, paying for both Ristics. In response, Tyler decides to go for one last Hail Mary. He cracks LED for 3 blue and discards his hand. Riel triggers, and Tyler draws 14 cards. He casts a Brainstorm. Mike's Ristic triggers, and he draws a card, taking a damage from Nekusar. Tyler draws 3 and puts 2 back on top. Unfortunately, he didn't find an answer, and Demonic Consultation resolves. Zach names Hypnox and exiles his library. Thassa's Oracle trigger resolves, and Zach wins the game. Ladies and gentlemen, what a game! Congrats to Zach on his win. That final turn was bananas. Zach did a great job of setting it up, and with a little bit of luck and a whole lot of skill, he turned it into a win. That has to be one of the all-time wildest turns ever showcased on this channel. The most valuable card for tonight's game goes to Rhystic Study. By the end of the game, 3 players controlled one, and throughout the game it showed why this card is so strong. In CEDH, almost every deck wants to cast multiple spells each turn, which Rhystic Study punishes and either stacks them or turns their spells into card advantage for you. This is a CEDH staple for a reason, and we highly recommend that you add this to almost all of your blue decks. This episode was made possible by all of your support. Support from viewers like you is what enables us to bring this to the world. If you want to help out, consider signing up to Patreon, buying some merchandise at our store, or purchasing cards from the TCG player links in the description. All of these help us bring content to you, and you get awesome merchandise, cards at great prices, and cool Patreon perks. If you cannot help financially, liking this video, subscribing to our channel, and sharing these videos goes such a long way as well. Well, that about wraps it up for this episode. Tune in next time when we duke it out to see who will be king of the competitive EDH table. Thank you so much for watching, and we will see you next time. Alright, time for Patreon shoutouts. I'd like to give a shout out to J-Rock, Wayan, Spielrahu, Sparks, Zods, Dylan Becker, Philip Hickey, Sanguinolency, Matt Wingrove, Snarps the Klept, Fur Berglund, Rakeko, Nick, Dante, CZ, Baby Jeebus, Pyro, Trey Payne, Dark, Delphdriz, Noah Saldana, and Brad Tobin. Thanks a lot, everyone. Really appreciate it.